Good afternoon, everybody. It is great to see you all outside on this beautiful day that feels like we're getting a lot closer to spring. Here with our superintendent, Dr. Leslie Torres-Rodriguez, with our chair of the Board of Ed, Aisha Clark, and with our Congressman, John Larson. And the first order of business today is just to say an enormous thank you to Congressman Larson, to our senators, to our entire Connecticut congressional delegation, because their leadership and their advocacy made possible one of the most consequential pieces of legislation in our country's history. President Biden's American Rescue Plan, which passed with the support of the Democrats in Congress, will make an enormous difference to communities across the country, including our community right here in Hartford. It would take us all the time we have and more to go through everything that this act does. But what President Biden signed into law yesterday will allow us to beat this virus, to begin our recovery, and to build back stronger right here in Hartford and in communities across Connecticut and beyond. The education funding that's in this bill will allow our school system to do what we all know needs to be done, which is to mount a massive multi-year effort to help our kids recover, re-engage, and heal. The funding that's in this bill for the expansion of vaccination effort will help us beat the virus and put it behind us. The funding that's in this bill for local and state government will help us to recover faster and more fully. It will allow us to help our kids heal in ways outside of the classroom. It'll allow us to help support our businesses as they come back and reinvest. It'll allow us to support arts and culture as we bring back the activity and life and vibrancy to our city after this difficult year. It'll allow us to dedicate resources to things like public safety, community safety beyond policing, ways that we wish we could have done all along in recent years, but is more important than ever and has been made more important than ever because of the challenges of this pandemic. So I could go on, but this bill is hugely consequential. Congressman Larson has been a tireless champion and advocate for the elements of this bill for many, many months. Ever since he and fellow congressional Democrats passed the HEROES Act last spring, they've been fighting to get this done. And now that they have a partner in the White House and partners in the Senate, it happened, and it will make a huge, huge difference. So it's now my privilege to turn this over to my partner, Superintendent Dr. Leslie Torres-Rodriguez, to talk about what this means for our educational efforts.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Mayor Bronin, one, for the collaborative partnership that we have had and continue to have as we try to navigate challenging times, but also for your team's leadership. And I echo the gratitude to Congressman Larson, not only his leadership, his advocacy, but efficacy. As we know today, we're here to discuss what this potential plan, the funding and what it means for us in Hartford Public Schools. We know that before the pandemic, there were inequities. We know that our most challenged communities are communities with the highest level of needs, needed additional support. And we had taken steps to address those in Hartford Public Schools, and then the pandemic hit us. And so a year later, here we are, not only looking with a deeper level of hope, but also with tangibles, opportunities now to reimagine what our instruction, what our learning and the supports are going to be like for students. We know that the past year, the way learning has happened, teaching has happened, the way we've partnered with our families, with our community partners, it looked, sounded, and it had to feel different. And we have yet the opportunity now in front of us to reimagine. You heard the mayor speak about some of the potential opportunities. Our days, our year, our school year can no longer feel the same, can no longer be the same. One, because it wasn't working for all students before. And now the level of need is even bigger. So we have to continue to reimagine. Yes, academically, but also in terms of the social, emotional supports for our students. But I will also add that this will allow us to build additional supports for our staff. Because with additional student needs, it means that we have to continue to deliver on our commitment to our staff, to support our students. And of course, we will not forget about our families. We know that we have a commitment to all of our schools. We have an ecosystem of school choice, and that means that in our magnets and in our neighborhood schools, we have to make sure that we bridge those gaps and those equity and access opportunities that at times are not available to us. This will allow us, this funding will allow us to do that year round, opening the doors of our schools earlier, staying open later throughout the entire year, and then expanding the partnerships that we have, because we know that we have an asset in terms of the partnerships in the city. So I am grateful, Congressman Larson, to you and to your the entire congressional delegation for not only the leadership but also the support. This is a big, big day, and moving forward, Hartford is going to make sure that our students, every single one, has access to opportunity that they deserve. Thank you, and now I'm going to actually ask our Chairwoman Clark, Chairwoman of our Board of Education, to share some words.
Thank you, everyone. I want to also send my sentiments of saying thank you so much to Congressman Larson for the work that he has done and all of those who have supported this act. It's important for us to understand that equity is what we stand for, and equity is what we need as it relates to our Hartford Public Schools. This year has been hard. It has been hard on our teachers, our families, our communities, and our young people who are in-person learning, and also those who are at home learning. So this opportunity right here, as Superintendent stated, will give us the opportunity to go ahead and provide supports for our families that they did not have before. The social-emotional learning that is happening and the things that are occurring in our families has not allowed us to do the things that we needed to do. So this is an opportunity for us to grab hold and show that we care, show that we love them, and that we're here and we're standing with them. And this is all the Hartford Public Schools students that we are doing. We have over 18,000 students that we're able to touch now in a different way. And so we're happy, and we want to thank all of those who are part of this, especially Congressman Larson. And we thank you for the partnership with the mayor, City Hall, our families, and especially to our teachers and our families. Thank you for your dedication, and now we have the support to continue to do the work that we're doing. So thank you so much.
And first of all, I want to acknowledge State Representative Ed Vargas. Representative Vargas, it's great to see you here. Thank you so much for being here and for your partnership in so many ways. Now it is my tremendous pleasure to introduce our Congressman, the best Congressman we could ask for here in the 1st District, Congressman John Larson. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Your Honor. Madam Superintendent, Chair, thank you so much for being here today. My good friend Eddie as well. What an outstanding time this is. But it doesn't happen without the consistent advocacy of people at the local level. From the outset of this pandemic, Mayor Bronin has been in touch with our office and working hand in glove about what were going to be the community and citywide needs, and especially the education needs that we know our children would need. And so we're so honored to announce that with the ascendancy of President Biden and his vision to tackle this COVID virus head on and get the money back to the communities and back to the states that they richly deserve. You know, $92 million going to the city, $127 million coming to the Board of Education. This is much needed money, and it comes at a critical time. A time that, because of the advocacy of these individuals who stressed over and over again the need to put money back in people's wallets and in their pockets so that they can use that to meet their spending and their bills. Put money back into their vaccines that go into their arms so that we can make sure that from our teachers to our necessary employees to every rank and file citizen has the opportunity to be vaccinated as we combat this deal. To put, frankly, put people back to work as well, because we know that this is needed to keep the economy moving. To have a $1.9 trillion budget passed, we refer to my colleague from Springfield to the north as the $1 trillion man, because of the effort on the Ways and Means Committee of making sure that we had both the short and the long-term focus that's going to be needed to not only get us through this pandemic, but after we take people from their knees and allow them to stand on their feet, to continue to make sure that we're turning this economy around. The president will sign the bill today, and the Treasury and Secretary Yellen couldn't have been more specific about the need for this money and then how it will be distributed over the next 60 days out to our states. And for this whole region to receive this money is nothing more than, if you'll excuse the pun, a shot in the arm. But a very positive short, because this is what we need to do in order to put Connecticut both back to work, but also provide these families who, through no fault of their own, found themselves in this situation where they sit across the kitchen table and wonder how they're going to make ends meet. And now to be able to provide the funding that will go directly to them is precisely what's needed. There hasn't been a bill on this order since the New Deal that carries with it the broad ramifications that this bill does, impacting people individually, impacting our education system, providing for our municipalities and cities, and making sure that these people who are on the front line every single day delivering on behalf of their constituents, it was long overdue for the federal government to step up and make sure that they were getting the resources that they were. So I'm honored to be here today, and even more so to work on a regular basis with mayors and selectmen and chairs of boards and superintendents of schools all across this state, in the first CD, and all around the country. And I think it's made for a very successful plan that we will continue to monitor and make sure that over the next 60 to 90 days, this money is getting out to the communities. And with that, we'll happy to take any questions that you might have. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I'm just wondering, we're Facebook Live, and folks, there's obviously people who these devices at times were fiscally conservative, and they're saying, where is this money coming from? Like, how can we afford this as a nation? Like, what would your
How can we not afford it as a nation? You know, it's on the level with the New Deal in terms of its scope, because we've not seen anything like this in my lifetime. And so this was much needed. And by the way, is the need changed since we passed the CARES Act and the other relief that we passed back in December? Ironically, for our colleagues on the other side of the aisle and some conservatives, why was that necessary funding then, but all of a sudden now it's not because Joe Biden's the president? The truth of the matter is that this is the kind of relief that is needed. And when you have the chairman of the Fed, Jerome Powell, coming out and say, do not make the mistake that we made back in 2000 and 2008. If you don't go big and and get this in the hands of people that need it, the economy will suffer. To date, the economy is not, and the last time I checked, the stock market's doing pretty well, and this is good news for everyone. And so now, by contrast of that, $2 trillion tax cut, $2 trillion tax cut, where we saw, virtually 1% of the nation get 83% of the benefit. In stark contrast to what we see happening here, where the money goes back to working families based on formulas. A family of four could receive as much as $8,800. That's what this was designed to do, especially because those who were laid off, those who were out of work, through no fault of their own, because we needed to tackle this pandemic, and then to make sure that we were also putting the money into the research, the vaccines, the hospitalizations, working to glow. Hartford Hartford Hospital here has been nothing short of a tremendous leader here in the state. So I would say to my colleagues, and I think most of them would agree, if you were to get them one-on-one, I don't think anyone's going to turn back the money that's coming to their states as a basis of this legislation passing. They'll be more than happy to accept it. Why? Because the governors and the mayors and selectmen of our cities understand and know just how valuable this money is.
How do you decide how, I'm assuming it's formulas too, but just for folks who haven't been following the news every day like many of us have, how does Hartford Public School get this much money versus Bridgeport or Danbury or other towns? How is that figured out? It's interesting. It's hard.
Well, it's all done based on a formula, and it's all done based on need. And so, for example, in the first CD, obviously, Hartford's the largest community in the first CD. And it also has some of the hardest to serve communities in terms of the poverty level. And so the formulas will be constructed on the basis of size and also on the basis of people's ability to earn. And so you want to make sure that you're getting the money out the door to people who need it. It's why individually also we put a bill forward. Initially the bill was $50,000 and $100,000. We changed that. For a state like Connecticut, we made it $75,000 per individual and $150,000 per couple, so that people would be able to utilize that funding and be part of getting that money so that they can help their families out.
What's the money for Hartford schools? Are there guidelines on how it will be distributed?
Well, yeah, the money will go to in the case of Hartford, the money comes to the city and the board directly. Any community above 50,000, the money will come directly. There are guidelines, et cetera. It cannot be used to reduce legacy costs and things of that nature. But the guidelines are also broad because the superintendent and chair of the Board of Education, the mayor of the city, know better how to utilize that money. And if the mayor said it once, he said it 1,000,000 times to me. I hope there's enough flexibility within this legislation so that we can utilize it. And that's true at the state level as well. For all those towns, 50,000 and below, that money goes to the state. They then apply to the state. The state has 30 days to get it back out to them. Cities above 50,000 will get the money directly and within the next 60 days after signing.
What are the top priorities in Hartford?
Well, why don't you ask the... Go ahead.
So some of the things that we have learned throughout the pandemic is that our students that have exceptionalities, our students that are learning English as a second language, for example, our students that have home insecurity, housing insecurity, food insecurity, those are our highest level of need. And so we know that we have to tackle this opportunity through that lens of equity and opportunity first, and then try to determine how to accelerate the learning loss for all students, and then the social emotional needs that our students and our families have.
And for folks who aren't aware, where are you guys in the reopening process? I know you have, just so if people aren't from Hartford, where are you, and will this money help with perhaps bringing more in, or is it tough with social distancing?
No, so we are in the process of actually, next week we welcome 10th through 12th grade that have been hybrid. They're going to come in and come to school every single day. And then our next focus is to bring the other students that are learning remotely, whose parents chose to learn remotely at the beginning of the year. And so we continue to work through that process. And yes, additional funding always supports us. We know that we hear from our teachers that although we have the necessary PPE, we would like to now move to have additional testing readily available throughout all of our schools. And so all of this, right, pieced together, allows us to have all our students back in a quick amount of time. Our goal is to have all of our students back in, unless there are extenuating circumstances in a family, all of our students back this spring.
And with that, we keep wondering about, sizing and spacing in the schools. Is that a problem? Even ventilation, is that kind of something you're going to be looking into as well?
Our ventilation is up to par. We actually just did our second round of updating. And so we were very diligent from the beginning. I think that is one thing that I want to emphasize, that we are not only grateful, but we're proud. We're proud to say that early on in the summer, we revised all of our standard operating procedures, trying to stay ahead of the need that we saw, and our staff, our families, and our students have been diligent in implementing those standard operating procedures and our safety protocols, which is what has allowed us to stay open for almost 8,000 students since the beginning of the school year. That's a big deal.
Can you tell us about the status of this potential shift to a longer school day and longer school year? You sound like you're very confident that that's where it's going. Does the union move closer? Where's that at?
So we're having conversations not only with the union. I want to make that very clear that, you know, we in Hartford Public Schools are committed to involving all of our stakeholders. Yes, our union is a key part there, but we have heard from our families that there's deep concern, and not only that, but we see it in our data. When we look at our students' need and their progress or their lack thereof, we know that there's an added level of need, and so we're going to start this summer. And that's part of an extended day, extended year. You know, when you use the word extended day, extended year, there's a lot of different models within that. And so we're going to start there for a larger number of students, things that, as the mayor said, we weren't able to do before. All we could serve before were 3,000 students in the summer in a school district of almost 18,000 students. That is a significant opportunity that we have in front of us. Not to mention what we're able to do with our older students. We know that engaging the older student is a different approach. And so that is an opportunity for us. And so as it relates to extended day, extended year, we continue to have those conversations with our collective bargaining units for next year. It could mean that we leverage our partners. We have community-based organizations that want to do this work, expand this level of work. And so that's the work, Ms. Rebecca, that we're doing in the next couple of weeks.
What can you tell us about what summer school will look like this summer? Where is that? Is it going to be available for every single grade this summer?
So that is a big shift that we have in one of our design, what we call design principles, and that is that we're going to expand summer school across all grades, pre-K through 12. In the past, we've only been able to do pre-K 3 for the highest level of need, and then some transition support for our students rising 9th graders. This is an opportunity to do that across all grades, and one piece that is different this year, we're going to open all of our schools. That is something that we were not able to do before. We had to regionalize our own summer program in the city. And so imagine now an opportunity. Imagine the access that is going to allow for our families to have a summer opportunity for their student near their home across the entire city.
And to be clear, it's because this money...
Absolutely. That is something that we would not have been able to do before.
Are you also now not needing to potentially cut something more from the budget that you all have passed? That
Yep.
extra $3.4 million?
That $3.4 million, actually, that was a conversation that the chairwoman asked. So does that mean that, that $3.4 million deficit is no longer at play? And that is a big deal for us because, those $3.4 million meant athletics that, were at risk, supports for our middle school students that were at risk. And so we're able to say that is no longer, a concern.
What about those wish list items that didn't make it into the budget?
Those wish list items we're gonna step back and have additional conversations about, given that we want to make sure that this is a lot of money, and so we want to make sure that we do so in a way that aligns to the goals that we have and the need that we have. And so wish lists are great, but we have to make sure that we first prioritize the deeper level of need that we have.
And Mayor Brown, similar with the city, what can you have now? And you mentioned a few things, but a little bit more in depth. What can you do now that you couldn't have done without this money, and how will it help the city?
Sure. First, I want to just put this, the number in context, because when people hear $92.5 million, it's a huge number. It's also important to recognize, though, this is meant to be spent over multiple years. We have till the end of calendar year 2024 to spend that, and that means it really represents about 5% of the annual budget each year. So it is a significant amount of money. It makes a huge difference, but I also think it's important to put that in context, that if you spent it equally over those 4 years, it's about a 5% per year of your city budget. I talked about some of the things that I think we will likely focus on, but let me just say, first of all, there's going to be a lot of discussion between myself and the City Council, but more importantly, between all of us and the community about how we prioritize these resources. We announced yesterday that we'll be holding a town hall 2 weeks from now, where we share the information that we have about this funding with our community, and then begin soliciting input and feedback about those priorities. But I think there are some things that I feel comfortable saying are and ought to be, and I sure hope will be, the focus of how we spend these resources. One is on supporting our young people. You heard the superintendent talk about all of the things that they're going to be doing on the school side to be able to offer that summer learning opportunity to every student in every school, to be able to offer additional personalized tutoring and other supports to students throughout the year. That makes a huge difference. As I said in my State of the City speech, one of the things that's important at the same time is that we offer every one of our kids the opportunity to do things beyond the classroom, in addition to academics, things that are just fun and that our kids are passionate about, and helps to spark that joy and bring them together with their peers again, and just heal. That's one of the things that I think we absolutely need to focus on. I talked earlier about making sure that we're doing everything we can to help our businesses come back and come back stronger. I do think that this is an opportunity also to make some investments over the next 3-4 years in public safety, in expanding some of our community partnerships, some of the outreach work that we do. Again, there's going to be lots of conversation with the community, lots of conversation with council, but I think that absolutely ought to be an area of priority. Now, one important last thing I'd say is, as much as possible, we want to let me say it this way, our first priority is to make sure that we are meeting this moment and responding to this crisis and meeting the urgent needs in front of us for our community and for our residents. But we also want to use these resources in a way that have the biggest impact long-term in our community. When we talk about building back stronger and better, we want our community to be stronger in the long run after this year. One of the big questions that's still out there is, how exactly can these funds be used when it comes to economic development? The language of the bill says that you can use these funding to respond to address the economic impact of the pandemic, but we're eagerly awaiting the Treasury Department's guidance on what exactly that means, because we want to get jobs growing again, we want to get people back to work, and we want to, as much as possible, make sure that we are building a stronger, more inclusive economy for our community over the long run, and we're eagerly waiting for that guidance on how exactly those funds can be spent.
With public safety, the crisis response team that's being developed is already funded.
Right.
Can you be any more specific about how you envision public safety being different?
Sure. I mean, again, I'm gonna be working closely with council, and we're going to be having lots of conversations with the community. So I'm not to stand here and tell you how it's going to be used, but I will say we have a number of outstanding community partners who do important violence intervention work. This may give us the opportunity to scale that up and to make sure that we are, that we are training and supporting those who are doing that work even more than we've been able to do in the past. Maybe it'll allow us to do some more in partnership with our hospitals. There's I think a lot that we'll be thinking about. You're right, our crisis response team is something that we've already set aside funding for, but there's an awful, but I'll give you another example. Our reentry center does really important work. The core of its work is focused on those who return to our community at the end of sentence. But there are many in our community who live with the burden of a criminal record from long ago, or who may be out and not at end of sentence, who we'd love to be able to support more. So that may be another opportunity. When I talk about supporting our young people, maybe there are opportunities to do more with our Youth Service Corps, which I think has, which both supports our young people and I think also helps to build a safer community. When I talk about the economic development opportunities, often talked about the linkage between how a city feels and looks and safety. Those two things are tied together. So if this gives us the opportunity to tackle some, of our worst blighted buildings that might be brought back and become retail shops again, creating jobs, restoring the vitality of a streetscape, maybe that'll help contribute to the strength and safety of a community as well. But again, we're going to have to wait for the detailed guidance from the Biden administration, the Treasury Department. We're going to have to wait for the conversations that we have with our community, and we're going to be very, very careful and strategic about how we use these resources, both to respond to the crisis in front of us and to try to build a stronger community in the long run. And lastly, let me just say that this is an unfamiliar situation for us as a city. For the last 5 years as mayor, the conversation has been, what do we have to do without to make sure that we are staying as disciplined as possible? And we have been extraordinarily disciplined. We've made tough cuts. We've maintained those cuts. This funding will allow us to make investments in the community that are desperately needed now more than ever.
One of the things we haven't talked about, this is probably one of the biggest economic impacts of COVID, is the eviction housing crisis. People are being evicted. Do you anticipate that there's other money that will go directly to those things, or that you guys, as the city of Hartford, will have to give some money or should give some money to deal with eviction prevention?
That's a great question. So the question is about eviction prevention and housing stability. And as you know, I said in my State of the City, we cannot let this health crisis end only to see an epidemic of evictions. And there are dedicated funding streams in this bill to try to support housing stability and prevent homelessness and evictions. So, for example, there's a substantial amount of money in this bill for rental assistance, and that, I think, will make a huge difference in our community here and in many, many other communities in helping to provide that stability for families, and also help make sure that landlords, those responsible landlords, many of whom are not big corporations, they're relatively small entities or individuals that need to pay their own mortgage or pay their bills, make sure that they come through this okay too. So there is significant amount of funding in this bill, again, thanks to our congressional leadership. And that's not just true on the housing front. There are also significant resources in this act for mental health support. There's significant resources for certain types of infrastructure. There are a lot of categories of dedicated funding beyond the locally directed dollars that we are going to work together to decide how to spend.
Thank you, everyone.